All right. So today's going to be quicker than I had remembered because the back end of this is talking about rubrics and scoring rubrics and how you use rubrics for constructed responses in general. And I forgot that was in here, and we've already spent a good amount of time on that, so I'm not going to beat a dead horse with that. We'll probably get out a little bit earlier today, which will be nice for all of us. Today, we are going to be talking about constructed responses and how to put those together, similar to how we spoke about selected response last week. For Thursday, we'll take a little look at performance assessment items and putting the whole picture together in terms of all the different types of responses we're looking at, and give you guys a good foundation to kind of go off and really get your the assessments that you have in the shape that you want to get them into. All right. So with constructed responses, I want you to have in your mind that a constructed response is literally anything that is not a selected response. So whether you are drawing a diagram or speaking or outlining something, anything that you are producing something in and of itself is a form of constructed response. And I think that there's a spectrum of how you need to look at constructed responses. They all need to be treated in terms of their analysis in a similar way. What I don't like about how most textbooks talk about constructed responses is that most academics end up limiting the idea of a constructed response to paper and pencil. So a written constructed response, as opposed to any of these other what are called those performance assessments. I think that a written response is a form of performance assessment, and that the performance assessments and constructed responses really are one and the same. Anytime that you have to fully express the thought, that should be looked at the same way. The reason that I don't like that that delineation of the written response is that there are plenty of students who can orally communicate something more effectively than they can communicate it in writing. They could draw a picture more effectively than they can communicate it in writing or orally. They could complete a project. They could do an art project. They could do a science experiment. They could do all these different things that show that demonstrate the production of knowledge that may be based on the field, maybe based on the individual, maybe based on the teacher, are more effective than writing. So I don't think it's appropriate, especially with how we are working with our kids now, that we really end up emphasizing writing in terms of knowledge and performance of a skill. Does that make sense? Writing needs to be developed. Writing about all these different components or fields of study or subject matter needs to be developed and needs to be developed fully. But I think that the different ways of, all the different ways of demonstrating evidence need to be more fully represented than they typically are. The challenge is, do we have the time to do all those things, right? When you have the most obvious example of this are lab-based science classes, right? Chemistry class, a biology class, a physics class. In those classes, take your typical high school where you have some students. I don't want to stereotype everyone into these couple of different boxes, but you have certain students who do really, really well in the labs, but are poor writers. You have some students who are really good writers about what they're doing, but maybe they perform poorly technically in the lab. And then you have the students who kind of neither go neither one way or the other, right? I think we need, our goal should be to have students that can do both of those well. But those are that performance skill is never fully developed for those that can do the writing, because the writing is so emphasized. That writing skill is never fully developed for those that can do the performance stuff, because it becomes so challenging for them. So the emphasis on writing, I think, ends up hurting everyone in the end. Lots of different types of these constructed response performance assessment items should be looked at. All right. Anyone have any thoughts on that? That was a little bit of a soapbox speech, but agree, disagree? What are your thoughts?
I agree.
You agree?
There should be different ways to do constructive response. In one of my classes last semester, we had to do an interview with a student specialist, and I interviewed my best friend's sister, who's like severely dyslexic. We were talking about how like she can't write what she knows, but like she would tell you everything she knows about something. So like for her, a constructive response would be harmful, but she would tell you.
Yeah. And I think what's challenging to me is, and I've made this case to you guys in this class before already, is as professionals, we rely more and more and more on writing. So that like technical writing or that professional writing has to be developed, right? But when you're trying to display content knowledge, what matters is the knowledge, right? But it goes so far both ways, I guess is my concern. But I think that's a great example, you know. And there are obviously accommodations for students that have whether it's dyslexia or otherwise, that have whose disabilities severely impact their writing. There are a lot of students that fall in that crack where they do not have a disability, but their writing is not strong, but they have the knowledge. How do you bridge that on an academic level? How do you bridge that on a professional level? It's challenging. It's challenging. I'm jumping too far ahead, but that's something to be thinking about as we talk today about constructed responses and as we talk on Thursday about performance responses, and we'll come back to that. Okay. Any other thoughts? Sorry. All right, great. Okay, so types of constructed responses. So there are fewer options than what we have with our selected responses. We really have short answers and we have essays. So these are limited to written constructed responses. I think those are the only two that you really need to look at. I define a short answer as anything less than a paragraph. An essay is anything more than a paragraph. What is significant about the paragraph that allows us to use it as a marker? What might be significant about that? You think it?
I feel like the form in a paragraph is like a really full, whereas like a paragraph is like a brief.
Let me push you in my direction of your direction. What is significant about a deeper thought? I agree. What is significant about expressing a deeper thought?
You get like the full understanding, like they know. You get the knowledge if they fully understand it.
Yeah, not what I'm looking for, but I love where you're going with it. So to me, the expression of that understanding requires a level of organization that the short answer does not require. So a short answer where you can go from a fill in the blank, a bulleted list, a few sentences, you don't really need to have that organized in any way. The organization of an essay is not just, obviously it helps the whole thing flow, right? But there are structural components of an essay that have to be there for it to be understood, right? So whether it's something as simple as indenting your paragraph, whether it's putting all your ideas in one paragraph and then the next ideas in the next paragraph, topic sentences, conclusion sentences, supporting ideas, all of these structural pieces start to come into play when you're looking at multiple paragraphs. On a short answer, you don't have any of those pieces. So in a short answer, you are purely looking at knowledge. On an essay or multiple paragraphs, you're looking at the content knowledge, but you're also looking at the structural knowledge and the conveyance of ideas that goes with that. So I think that I hadn't thought about it in terms of this higher order thought before, but I do think you have to be organized to present those higher order thoughts, right? I feel like some of my lectures are a really good example where when I'm really organized and you have those structural pieces, I can convey much deeper thoughts and expressions to you guys than when I'm a little bit scatterbrained and I'm just giving you like bullet point, right? That's one is just content that's not organized. And I, as a teacher, can say, all right, I'm looking for 5 things. It's there, it's there, it's there, it's there, it's there, versus A, B, C, D, E, in order, organized, structured. I can understand. Has anyone tried to read an essay that doesn't have paragraph indents? It's like the most annoying thing in the world. It's like, where do my ideas start and stop, right? That doesn't have anything to do with content, right? All the same content can be there. It's just organization. And when you're grading at an essay at multiple paragraphs, you start caring about that stuff. So I think that in terms of how you grade, how you evaluate, here you look at content. For essays, you start to use rubrics. That's really where that falls. Okay. All right. So short answers in general, I think, are very effective uses for responses that have direct answers. So when you are fishing for one specific thing, that's where you're going to use a short answer question. So if you're looking for a definition of something, if you're listing something, if you are, and this is really for fill in the blank, sorry. If you are, yeah, like those types of ideas are really good to use for fill in the blanks. So when you are looking for, now I'm doing it. I'm sorry. I am really fried right now. Let's say this over. Short answers are good for these types of direct responses. Those can be done as either short answer or fill in the blank. The way that those types of things are presented are going to impact the type of information you get in terms of what your student can and can't do. What's so useful about constructed responses in general is that just by producing the response, you are able to analyze things beyond the content, right? When you can, even in a list or a short answer, when you can analyze things like spelling, like capitalization, like simple punctuation, when you can add those pieces in that you miss in multiple choice, you have a richer behavior in order to analyze. So 2 questions here, just like before, exact same question or knowledge that we are putting out. The first 3 presidents were blank, blank, and blank, versus who were the first 3 presidents. It seems simple, or it seems pointless to have like what's the big deal between those 2 things. But this allows for short answer allows for more behavior to be omitted. I have to put the commas, I have to create, I have to do the and, I have to create the list versus just filling in the blanks, just the knowledge. The second thing is with the short answer, what you're able to do that you can't do in the fill in the blank is you can actually ask a question. Asking a question begs a response. That's something that conceptually makes more sense to a child. Fill in the blank, again, this is a basic question, but the more complex you get, the more something like that matters. This is a statement that is harder to follow, not harder to follow, but harder to analyze for a student. Okay? As we'll see, there are more rules that you have to follow when you start using fill in the blank versus asking a simple question. All right? Whenever you can, if you're doing constructed responses, to the degree that you can, I suggest that you use short answers over things like fill in the blank. Just ask a question. Students are used to asking questions. When you are asked a question, this statement is complete, right? There's no, I don't understand what these blanks mean, right? That seems simple here, but you'll see what I'm talking about in a second. Ask questions, get responses versus filling in with statements, all right? It's just a clearer thing for a student. All right, so when you are writing short answer questions, use direct questions. Like I just said, ask the thing that you want to ask. Don't mess around with statements. Don't mess around with interpreting things. Just ask the question. What is this? How do you do that? Why did these characters do this? Set up concise responses. When you ask a short answer question, it should be very clear how much your students are expected to produce. You never want your student to get lost in trying to decide how much information to convey. All right? Unless that is part of the task. You may be in a situation where I could see in a third grade class where ELA class where you're talking about some story where you read a passage and there's a question that's like, list as many characteristics that you can about the setting of the story. And your test literally is how many pieces can they remember, right? So if you get 2, that tells you something. If you get 20, that tells you something. And the amount of information is truly what you are evaluating, all right? For most other scenarios, that's not what you're looking for, right? You're looking for a quality of response. You're looking for the degree of in-depthness that they're writing with. Let them know exactly how much they're expected to write. Not in terms of sentences or lines, but in terms of maybe ideas, all right? A lot of the projects for my other classes, more so than this, I'm trying to remember the things we've turned in, but I'll say, give 3 examples about blank, right? You probably get this type of thing a lot in college classes. Give 3 pros and cons. Give compare and contrast with 5 different ways, or whatever it is. There are a number of things that I want you to think about, but that's the guideline. What question do I always get from my students? How many pages do you want? What's my answer? What do you think my answer would be? A couple of you have heard this before, right? My answer is however much it takes for you to convey the idea. I don't care how much you write, as long as you cover the content. There's an amount of writing that I know to be necessary to cover the content. So if I ask you to compare and contrast 5 different things and you give me 5 sentences, I'll say, you didn't do this well, right? I don't even have to read it. But doesn't matter to me how much you write, so long as you cover the ideas. That's what you're looking for with these responses. Don't look for numbers of pages. Look for answering the question. So with that, sorry, that was a long-winded way of saying, in your short answer responses, if 1 word is all you're looking for, that's easy enough. But anything more than like a sentence, where you're asking to describe something, maybe, this open-ended question is going to leave students in limbo. And I think that especially on like a timed assessment, you're going to have students that get down important information, but maybe not all the information, just because they want to get to the other questions, right? And you may take them off because they didn't give enough important information, but you didn't outline that appropriately. So allow for concise responses, but convey those expectations in a meaningful way. Filling in the blanks, or fill in the blanks. Just like our, and I'm getting ahead of myself a little bit. Yep. Just like with our multiple choice questions, there are ways to give hints in fill in the blanks that are less, that have less to do with students' knowledge and more to do with the unrelated hint that you gave. So if I'm giving a list of 3 things, and one of the 3 things has 2 words, and I put blank, comma, blank, blank, comma, and blank, then that's a prompt for the 2 words. Don't do things like that. Don't alter the length of the blanks that you're using. There are little things that you want to make sure that you don't do to intentionally or otherwise provide non-content based hints to the child. All right. Put the blanks at the end of your sentence. Blank, blank, and blank were the first 3 presidents versus the first 3 presidents were blank, blank, and blank. Right? If you are going to use those types of fill in the blanks, give as much information as you can before you ask the question. It's very confusing, especially if you're doing a larger passage with more blanks in it. If every 8th word is a blank, how are you comprehending that? Especially if the blanks are related to each other. You see what I'm saying? It's when I'm reading a sentence, I don't traditionally skip every 5th word and try and figure out what they mean, right? We want to, again, this is going back to not trying to confuse our children. Give them as much information as you can and then ask the question. So in a fill in the blank, if you are going to use that, put the blanks at the end of the sentence, have them all be the same length, put them together. That really limits the type of information that you should be getting with fill in the blank, and that's good. If it doesn't fit all of those criteria, then I would say ask the question and use a short answer response. All right, a direct question, short answer response. So this is saying all of those things. Yep, literally just said all of this. Any thoughts on those ideas between short answers, fill in the blank? What do you guys see as the strengths or weaknesses of either of those 2 types of responses in general? What's the strength of a fill in the blank question or statement? Yeah, definitely.
I think it's not as
Okay, good. It's a nice middle ground, right? When you are what I like about fill in the blanks is you're typically getting straightforward information. You are not looking for super complex information in those fill in the blank. The alternative being multiple choice or fill in the blanks with a word bank, which is really just matching, right? Is that you're still asking the child to produce the thing. So they have to know it. They can't rely on the answers that are there unless you're putting none of the above and really upsetting your children that way. They still have to produce the thing, but you don't have to put it in such a complex way, right? I just want information, but I don't want you to choose the information. I want you to know the information. Good. What else? Are there any, what else might be good about a fill in the blank? I honestly can't think of anything really either. That's it. It's a simple question format. It's a good way to produce simple information. But I don't think, but beyond that, I think things get confusing. I think they get murky. I don't think there are many other advantages to that. Fill in the blanks with word banks. Don't do them. Please don't do them. Exact same thing as matching. It's just, it's going to create more problems than it's worth. Just do a multiple choice task if that's what you're going to do. Okay. Fill in the blanks should be produced. In grad school, I had a 50, 75, I don't remember what it was, a long final exam that was fill in the blank. And he gave us a word bank. And he said, there are more words on here than you will use. Every word can be used more than once. Some of the answers were multiple words long. Like the terms were multiple words long, and he just put one space in between every word. So we didn't know where one term started and the other term ended. So his point to us was, if you need this, you're already screwed, right? So there's like 200 words with nothing more than a space in between them. That might have poisoned me forever on word banks. But to that point, you're not testing anything. You're losing the significance of a fill in the blank if you put a word bank. All right, cool. What about short answers? What's good about a short answer? What might be bad about a short answer? Is there a difference between short answers that replace fill in the blank versus short answers that have a little bit more information to them? There we go. What are some good or bad things about short answer questions? Yeah.
So when we were talking about the president's one, the example on there, I think it's actually a little vague. So it's not exactly the same thing as the short answer. So the short answer is like these three presidents, their names in this blank. But that in short response is like, who are they? That can be so much more broad, right? So you kind of have to quantify specifically what you want.
What are the names of the first three presidents versus?
Going to go on a whole like tangent about like who were the first three presidents, right?
So I love that you said that. Of all the sections I've taught at that, I've never gotten that before. Did I set up a concise response? No.
It's really vague, yeah.
Right. So that maybe that's not a good example or an example of a good question there. What are the names of the first three presidents versus tell me about the first three presidents?
Right, because if it's a constructed response where they have to write instead of just filling the blank, they could have all this like space here.
Totally. Yeah.
Put so much extra, right?
Right. And I think that that space especially on a paper test, how significant is that to you as a student? That's hugely significant, right? If my teacher gives me this much space, that tells me I'm only expected to write a few sentences. They give me this much space, I got to fill that, right? So that is it's little things like that that make a difference for how a student is going to perform and what type of response you're going to get. You're not saying fill the space with the information. right? You're saying, tell me about. How, when you get the prompt, feel free to use space on the back. Feel free to use extra paper. Oh, crap, now I have to, right? If I don't go to the back, did I do it well enough? At the university level, when you're giving constructed response tests, one of the best things that we can do is have you take it electronically, do it in Word format, put the same amount of space, and just keep hitting enter, right? But on a paper and pencil test, you don't have access to that. So you have to think about how that's going to impact your students' response. Excellent, I love that. What else? Good or bad about short answers?
You can see like how much they retain something, so like with the president's question, if they give you like 2 or 3, you can see like, okay, they learned this much, but they didn't do that.
Excellent, yeah. So while I said set up concise responses, you also have the ability to go on and on and on and on and on and list as much information as you possibly can, all right? And in some scenarios, that's really good. Some scenarios, that's not what you want at all. I don't want you to go on forever. I want you to just show me that you understand. But in some senses, it is open-ended. Relating constructed responses to performance assessments. I remember in, I believe it was 8th grade, it was the same class that had the true false with 20 true questions that I doubted myself. We read Huck Finn, and the project was create like an amusement park island that has characteristics of Huck Finn in it. Put as many as you want. You could put 5, you could put 30, you could put 100. You could do as much as you want within the bounds of however much poster paper you bought, right? So that was a performance assessment like this that allowed for you to give an open-ended amount of information. The challenge with the open-ended amount of information is, do I want it in this more rudimentary form? Give me ideas about who the presidents are, or do I want it in essay form? So that has to be clarified when you're writing out your prompt. Give me information about, don't worry about organization, don't worry about structure, versus write a 5-paragraph essay on who were the first 3 presidents. Also a totally appropriate question. All right, good. What else? Anything else good or bad about short answer?
I mean, I feel like for like any kind of writing, like where the kid has to write, it shows like how much they know. Because like, that's what I keep thinking of. Is like how, like if the kid knows a lot about the subject, they're gonna keep writing. But if they don't know a lot, they're gonna keep, and everything's gonna be very vague.
Mm-hmm. Yep, absolutely. And I think that when you give not a physical space to fill, but a conceptual space to fill. If you say, give me 3 ideas about this, and you get like 3 words here and 2 words here and 4 words here, they did their 3 ideas, but it's not robust. You gave them a defined space to fill conceptually, and they couldn't do it. So the floor for a constructed response in terms of how poor a student can do, and I don't say that in a bad way, say that in a really good way actually, is actually 0, right? A student cannot answer. And then they didn't get it all. They can answer very minimally, and you then learn, all right, they really need to understand this. You're putting a ceiling on what you care about in terms of knowledge. And that's okay. That's totally fine. When, how many of you, especially in secondary, can imagine a situation where you give an essay on, we won't get to essay, you do a constructed response, and the student's information goes well above and beyond what you actually taught, right? Yeah, I could totally see that, where their background knowledge, their interest in it led to gaining more information than what was in class. It doesn't help you at all. Good job, you really, you know all the things about this topic. That's fine. But you're actually missing an opportunity to measure what they learned in your class, right? Versus the floor, where it's like, okay, we really need to work on this. So I think that that range is good there. The ceiling is not perfect, but you want to keep that for this type of work. The floor is where it needs to be. Good, good. So I think what we're seeing is that there's a lot more ability to work within the short answer response than there is in the fill in the blank, right? The fill in the blank has a good home. It is useful for the thing that it is useful for. The short answer has the ability to be this really powerful tool. It's not going to be used for everything, but it can be used for a lot. What I think, sorry. What I think is important to understand about the relationship between short answer responses and selected response items in general. Essays, we kind of, hopefully we see as something bigger and different. There isn't really an equivalent to an essay or a performance assessment in the multiple choice or in the selected response realm. But it's important to understand that anything that you can ask as a selected response, you can also ask as a constructed response. Anything that you can ask as a multiple choice, you can also ask as a short answer. Your challenge as a teacher is finding the balance between what you need to see as a short answer versus what you can effectively ask in a multiple choice. It's not the case that students need to produce every single response. That is taxing on the student. That is a lot of information. Not all information is created equally, right? There's some information that I need you to analyze. And when you need to analyze it, I need you to produce it. There's some information that I just need to know if you know. Can you find the important item out of the unimportant items? Here they all are. You tell me which ones are important, right? I don't need you to just produce that name or a date or something along those lines. History people. There are so many, literally thousands of dates that are significant in history. What matters more, the date or what happened? Hopefully we think what happened, right? None of you are history. The date, that's your multiple choice. What happened, that's your constructed response. The analysis of what happened, that's your essay. So trying to figure out what type of information to ask in which type of response is what's going to be important for you. Where you are in the curriculum, what grade, what's been taught, all of those things are going to help determine what happens in each of those. In a lower grade, you might ask a higher order question as a multiple choice because you haven't taught it fully and you want to see, can my student do this thing yet? Can they identify the near related response versus the obvious not responses versus the higher grade where that same question becomes the essay or the short answer, all right? So what you're teaching, what grade you're teaching it at, where in the curriculum you are is going to help determine, but a balance between the two is going to produce a more high quality assessment. A couple of you have taken 392 with me. I give a midterm in 392. That midterm is all constructed response, right? 15 constructed response questions. Everyone hates it. It's a really good midterm. It's a really good midterm. These three took it. It's all the critical information that you are going to be using as a special education teacher. There's no fluff in that thing, right? You will use all of that information at some point, and it's information that I need you to produce some point or another. Maybe I could split it between a midterm and a final. Maybe it's better as a final. I do it that way. We get it over with. It's fine. Everyone passes. It works out. But I had to make, when I was writing that test initially, I had to make a decision about was any of that information, was I going to present any of that information as selected response? And I came down on no, because it was all too important to produce. So then I had to make a decision, do I take some of this information out and replace it with knowledge-based content? And I said, no, this is information that you need to produce. This is the measure of the class. This is the measure of what we've done. So I end up giving all these qualifying statements and I scare people, and then I let people, you know, I lift them up and they're okay. But it's a challenging thing to do, to write a constructed response assessment for an hour and 20 minutes with a lot of tell me all the things about is really challenging for a student. As you guys are writing for elementary, for secondary, think about that. Think about what you are trying to accomplish. That's really the balance that we're trying to get here. Essays, I'm kind of like chopping it here before I go to the next piece. Essays are different because they're a beast in and of themselves, right? And actually on that midterm, I do have 2 essays, but they're take home, open your book, relax, get in front of your computer, get all your information and organize your thoughts, right? But on the content assessment, the knowledge and understanding, you're going to have to decide what information gets represented in what way and what you as a teacher can do with that. All right. There are a few types of questions that you expressly want to use selected response items for. Does anyone think what those skills might be? Doesn't matter the content, doesn't matter the grade. There's always there's a place where there's always an opportunity for a couple of good selected response questions. Could be true, false, could be multiple choice, doesn't matter. The beginning of the test, the assessment, looking at prerequisite skills. A really good assessment will have a couple of questions at the very beginning that will, 1, prime knowledge for your students. Are you thinking about this from before? Are you thinking about this from before? That will allow you as a teacher to say, did my student know this super easy thing? Or were they missing even the prerequisite skills to do the rest of the assessment? So 2 or 3 or 4 questions at the beginning of the assessment that really quickly assess background knowledge or prerequisite skills, and then you jump into your full thing. I don't think that those early questions need to be constructed response. I think that those can always be selected response. All right. Okay, any questions there? Cool. All right, essays. That's what we'll finish with today. Yeah. So essays are generally going to be used to assess 2 things. So again, I'll belabor this point. Essays are a type of performance assessment that is done in written form. All right? To me, that is the exact same type of skill as drawing a diagram, doing a science project, playing a piece of music on an instrument, right? Writing as a skill is a higher order piece. We just happen to spend a lot of time on it, right? Essays are used to assess two things. If you are not assessing one of these two things, you're doing it wrong. You are using an essay to assess both content and writing skills. If you are not trying to assess writing skills, don't assign an essay. Assign something else. Assign something that just looks at content. We always struggle with, in the non-ELA content areas, with how to grade essays, right? If I have an essay on a social studies report, do I grade writing skills or do I grade just the content? Again, if you're not grading the writing skills, why are you signing a writing assignment? I don't understand why that is a question for this. An essay is, by definition, it is a thing that incorporates writing skills. Make sure that you are doing both. All right. Yeah, here. For struggling learners, spelling, grammar, punctuation, vocabulary get in the way of demonstrating content. For those types of students, either use the essay as an assessment of those things, or have them do something else. That's your friend who can convey it orally, right? You can say it, great. You can draw it, great. If you can show me how to do it, great. But if I'm also doing measuring writing skills, then no, you have to use the essay. So given that, prior to, especially in the 1 to 5, prior to giving an essay as an assessment, you as the teacher have to make sure that the essay, the components of the essay have been taught. It is not natural to go from writing a few sentences to writing an organized essay. It's not natural to go from writing an unorganized paragraph to writing an organized paragraph. It's not natural to go from being able to put out all the ideas in the world to introduction, beginning, middle, and conclusion, right? How to form the essay is a skill that needs to be taught. Teaching 2nd grade, we were pretty far into the teaching of the essay, the structure of it, but we were not fluent by any means. So what that meant was very few of the assessments that we gave were truly done in essay format. When they were done in essay format, they were given prompts on how to structure their essay. In the beginning, during the middle of the story, at the end, intro and conclusion were prompted in some other ways. But if your child hasn't mastered the structure, it needs to one, either be taught, or two, be prompted so that it's not going to interfere, the structure isn't going to interfere with their ability to convey that content. All right. You allow for the level of writing skill that the child has mastered in other formats. So for those 2nd graders, they hadn't mastered the essay components, but they had mastered capitals, punctuation, sentence structure, that kind of thing. So those types of prompts weren't in there. First grade, where you're still learning sentence structure, maybe your early assessments of a sentence have a prompt for a capital letter at the beginning and a period at the end, and you have to just fit your sentence in between. Third grade, you have a little bit more fluency with that structure, so you're given paper that looks like that with that space in the middle, right? So there's a prompt for that indent. There are all sorts of ways that you can control for the structural components that your students should or should not have mastered to that point, all right? At the secondary level, your expectation is that all those things have been mastered. So that's when you're just giving your children the blank piece of paper and saying go, right? Still, when you get to the rubric side, the scoring side, which should be available as they're doing their essay piece, their writing piece, there should be a spot on there for structure, grammar, spelling, all those things. So the students know to what degree they are expected to attend to that while they are writing. All right. So already we're jumping ahead into rubric land that allows us to guide our students into what those expectations are. Okay. Last couple of pieces. So when you are creating essays, make sure your students understand the response requirement lengths or the function of not having a length, right? So that's kind of what I was talking about before, expanded out. Whenever I give any sort of written-based project, I can't think, I could be wrong, there might be a couple out there, but I can't think of very many, if any, projects where I give that response length, right? But I tell my students, write to the degree that you feel answers the question. So when we have that expectation, my assumption when you turn in one paragraph is you think you covered it all. And when I say you didn't fully cover it, you can't come back to me and say, well, you didn't tell me how much to write. I said, keep going, right? I don't, look, all of you that have the opportunity to give your own essay questions, you're going to say, write 2 pages, write 4 pages, write 6 pages. I just don't see a point to that. I don't see what that gets you. When I started doing that in classes, I would get inevitably 2 things. One, lots of fluff. So here's your 8-page paper. You could have said what you needed to say in 4 pages, but because it said 8 pages, you wrote 4 pages of BS, right? Or the person who wrote 12 pages and started cutting out information so they could fit it into 8 pages. There's and neither of those are structure or are relevant to the content. Maybe the 4-page paper and the 12-page paper were just as good, but both had to be adjusted to that 8 pages. Give your students the opportunity to write as much as is necessary. Provide a clear prompt. This is the key to a good essay. It's so easy when we get into essay writing to have within our prompt 3 different lists of things that need to be covered throughout the essay. Make sure to include A, B, and C when you discuss D, E, and F, whatever the next 3 are, right? Structure your question so that a child can easily reference what they've done versus what they need to do. Don't let those prompts, and all for next week, I'll try and get some good and bad examples of essay prompts for you guys. But don't convolute the essay from the jump with a bad prompt. time management for essays. That's a skill that has to be taught. How many of you panic when you get an essay because you either spend too much time, usually it's too much time prepping, right? I can talk about this on the performance management side of things. I remember having to do an art project, I think it was in like 4th or 5th grade, and I spent days and days and days just copying this picture as a draft, and it was perfect, but it was a draft. And then I had one day to flip it around into the final product, which was obviously not nearly as good, right? Poor time management. When you have your essay in an assessment and you spend 30 minutes of your 45 minutes outlining things, that's not going to get you very far, right? Teaching the time management, and I really think this happens at all ages. I think you can still teach time management to college students, you can teach time management to professionals, but I think time management when it comes to timed writing in any way, shape, or form can absolutely and should absolutely be taught. You know, having prompts of, I recommend you spend 10 minutes, you know, outlining this, but then after that, you want to make sure you started your essay, then set a timer, and at 10 minutes, you say, okay, 10 minutes is up. Move to your response. You should be writing your response by now. I think that type of thing is good. Avoid optional essays. Why is that important? If you, let's say, again, more in the secondary level, why might that be a thing? Why is that there? When you think that optional essays might be good? Yeah.
Do you mean like have the option to do it, or give them like you can answer either of these?
Either of these. Like here are 4 essay questions, choose one.
They're gonna pick the one that they know the best.
Yeah. Absolutely. Right? They're going to pick the least effort response there. And the implication there is, I know this content. I probably don't know the other content, right? So if you're asking essay questions, then chances are there's content that you want assessed. It's not, this one is not from a student perspective, but from a teacher perspective, you're missing out on an opportunity to assess some level of content. Now, I don't care at this point, I don't care about the writing skills in all 4 of those essays, but if I thought the question was worth asking, then it's probably content that I want to see if you have something to say about. So maybe having shorter essays, write 2 or 3 paragraphs on this topic and this topic and this topic, maybe that's enough. If it's you know, a summative assessment for a higher order secondary class, and again, you know, social studies is the easiest thing to go back to because it's so wide reaching. Maybe you're not assessing content, but the ability to analyze, right? Same thing in ELA, secondary English, right? I don't care so much about your understanding of a particular text. I care about your ability to analyze text in particular. Therefore, it shouldn't matter which text we use, okay? But if you're trying to assess content, lots of content, don't do it through essays. The challenge there is that if you have an essay that does require content knowledge and you happen to hit a gap in knowledge, you might not inadvertently, but unfairly be punishing a student who maybe missed or struggled with that one topic. So there's a balance there that you have to look at. Remember in high school in American history, it was the AP test, that's what it was. In European history, the AP test had it gave you a passage and then you had to analyze. The US history test was, you know, here was this event, talk about it. And it could be anything in all of American history. And it was that was the scariest thing. my teacher had a 15-year track record of picking, of like knowing what that topic was going to be. And he nailed it that year. And he switched his thought at the last minute. I think it's going to be this topic. We all studied that, and he was spot on. Without that, I don't know if I passed that test. That's not fair by anyone's standards. But that's the danger of having just one essay. So if you're assessing content, use smaller questions. They can still be essay style questions, but use smaller questions to assess content. If you have larger ideas, that's where that one essay can come into play. All right? Try and answer it yourself. When you write an essay question, try and answer it yourself. Have your colleagues answer it. See what type of responses you get. That's a really good way to kind of know what you should expect from your students. All right, and we'll stop there. Yeah.
Is there like a requirement for like each subject to ask a certain amount of like written responses? Because like when I think about like history class, like I can't think of a single time I had to write an essay for history with all like memorizing and matching.
Yeah.
I figured like I would have learned more if I would have to write something.
For sure.
Memorized.
No, there's definitely not. And what's challenging, particularly at the secondary level, is that there are fewer and fewer across content. There are fewer and fewer curricula that really work towards those types of questions, right? I'm thinking, so in something like at the elementary level, Eureka Math, right? If Eureka does one thing really well, it has assessments that directly assess it as a curriculum, the curriculum-based assessment, right? And it asks questions in lots and lots and lots of different ways. When you get a textbook, there aren't assessments, so to speak, in textbooks, right? There's chapter questions, there's guiding questions. There are a lot of essay type questions in those chapter questions, but those aren't formative or summative assessments in any way, shape, or form. You tell me, why did you in history? Why did you get assessments that were all multiple choice? Super easy answer. Easy to grade. You have 30 kids in 6 different sections, and you have 25 or 30 questions. I don't want to read all those essays. Yeah, yeah, no chance. I still don't want to do that, right? It's harder to do. It is harder to do. But I would gonna put down some of your prior teachers, and don't be these teachers, but I am assuming that they were giving tests, not assessments. Good question. So there's no standard. This is what I consider, and what I've taught, what I've seen, what I've read. These are best practices. Have assessments that have different types of questions. Assess your students in different ways. Allow your students the opportunity to demonstrate knowledge in different ways. One of the things that we'll get to next week is when you have a student who is strong in one area or with one type of question or type of response, you can do one of two things. You can either rely on that type of response for all of their knowledge, or you can use the strength in that type of response to help expand their other repertoires. The student that does the best is the student who can write, who can talk, who can do labs, who can draw, who can understand the outside world, who can understand each other, right? The person who is well-rounded doesn't care how you can, or how they're asked to demonstrate the information. So they're comfortable in all those things. Most of us are comfortable with one or two. And that's really what's going to separate a lot of your students from each other over time. All right. Any other questions? Okay, cool. I will see you all on Thursday.